My father sneaks in every night, she cried, her small hands trembling as she pointed toward the dark hallway of the old farmhouse. The words froze the rancher, Ethan Cole, where he stood. He had come by to deliver hay and check on the widow who lived there, but what the little girl just said sent a chill down his spine. He glanced toward the empty hallway, where shadows danced under the flickering light bulb, and his heart pounded. The girl's wide, tearful eyes held a truth she didn't yet understand, and Ethan knew he couldn't just walk away. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to Gentle Heart, and leave a like and comment if this story touches your heart. Ethan had lived in the quiet outskirts of Montana all his life. A man of few words and steady hands, he spent his days tending cattle and fixing fences on his family ranch. Ever since losing his wife in a car accident 3 years ago, he had kept mostly to himself. The only thing that pulled him out of his shell was helping others, repairing a neighbor's barn, delivering feed to old Mrs. Dawson, or volunteering at the local church when they called. That was how he'd met Lily and her mother, Sarah. They had moved into the worn-down farmhouse next to his property just a few months ago. Sarah, a young widow herself, was polite but distant, always seeming tired and wary. Lily, her daughter, was a quiet 7-year-old with big brown eyes and a sadness that seemed far too deep for her age. That evening, Ethan had stopped by because Sarah hadn't shown up for work at the diner. When Lily opened the door, her face was pale, and tears streaked her cheeks. "Mommy's sleeping," she whispered. "But Daddy sneaks in every night. I see him." Ethan's chest tightened. Sarah had told him once that Lily's father had died 2 years ago in a construction accident. So what was this child talking about? He crouched down gently. "Sweetheart, are you sure? Maybe it was a dream." She shook her head violently. "No, he comes in. I hear his boots. I see him by my bed. He looks at Mommy and then me. But Mommy doesn't wake up." Her voice broke into sobs, and Ethan felt a cold wave of dread run through him. He stepped inside carefully, calling out for Sarah. No answer. He found her in the bedroom, lying in bed, fully clothed, an empty pill bottle on the nightstand. Her chest rose and fell weakly. Ethan's instincts took over. He rushed to her, checked her pulse, and called 911 with trembling fingers. The operator told him help was on the way. He grabbed a damp towel, pressed it to her forehead, and whispered, "Stay with me, Sarah. Please stay." Minutes later, the ambulance lights flickered through the window, painting the walls red and blue. As the medics took Sarah away, Lily clung to Ethan's hand, her small body shaking. "Don't let them take her," she cried. "She'll be alone." Ethan knelt beside her, his voice thick. "I promise, you're not alone. I'll stay until your mom's okay." That night, when the farmhouse went quiet again, Ethan made cocoa for Lily in his kitchen. She sat at the table, clutching her mug, too scared to drink. "He used to come when Mommy cried," she whispered. "Now he comes when she sleeps. I think he's sad, too." Ethan didn't know what to say. Maybe the image of her father was her way of explaining grief. Maybe her young mind had turned loneliness into a ghost that comforted and scared her all at once. But he didn't correct her. He just listened, nodding, letting her talk. Sometimes, that's all a child needs, someone to listen without judgment. Days turned into weeks. Sarah recovered at the hospital, slowly regaining her strength. The doctors said she had mixed her medication with sleeping pills, likely by accident. Ethan visited often, bringing Lily to see her mother. He noticed how fragile Sarah looked, but also how her eyes softened whenever Ethan entered the room. "You saved my life," she told him quietly one afternoon. "I don't even remember calling for help." Ethan shook his head. "It wasn't me, it was Lily. She spoke up when she was scared. That took courage." Sarah smiled weakly, tears glistening. "She told me about the nights she saw her father. I think it was her way of feeling him close. I never talked to her about him. I was too broken. Maybe that was my mistake." When Sarah finally came home, Ethan helped fix up the old farmhouse. He repaired the door hinges, cleaned the gutters, even built a small swing for Lily in the backyard. The girl's laughter slowly began to return, faint but real. She'd often wander to Ethan's ranch, feeding the horses or following him around the barn. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, she looked up and asked softly, "Do you think my daddy can see me from heaven?" Ethan wiped his hands and crouched beside her. "I think he can, and I think he's proud that you're taking care of your mom." Lily smiled shyly. "I think he sent you to us." Those words hit Ethan like a quiet thunderclap. He didn't know how to respond. He just nodded, his throat too tight for words. Months passed, and the bond between the three of them grew naturally, not rushed, not forced. Sarah started smiling again. She took shifts at the diner, saving money to start her own catering business. Ethan would often drop by, pretending to need an extra cup of coffee, though everyone in town could see he came just to check on her. One night, during a heavy storm, there was a knock on Ethan's door. It was Lily, drenched and frightened. "Mommy's crying again," she said. Without hesitation, Ethan grabbed his coat and followed her. When they reached the farmhouse, he found Sarah sitting by the window, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. She looked up, startled to see him. It's hard sometimes," she whispered. "Even when you try to move on, some nights the past sneaks back in." Ethan sat across from her, his voice soft but firm. "You don't have to face it alone anymore." She met his eyes, and for the first time, he saw not just sorrow, but something like peace beginning to bloom there. After that night, something changed. Ethan became part of their lives, not out of duty but out of quiet love. He taught Lily how to ride a horse. He brought Sarah wildflowers every Sunday. And slowly, the house that once felt haunted by loss began to fill with warmth again. One afternoon, almost a year after that first terrifying night, Lily ran up to Ethan with a drawing in her hand. "Look," she said proudly. It showed 3 figures holding hands, a man, a woman, and a little girl. Above them was a cloud with a smiling face. "That's Daddy," she said, pointing to the cloud. "He doesn't sneak in anymore. He just watches from up there." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. He knelt and hugged her tightly. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," he whispered. Later that evening, as the sun sank behind the fields, Sarah came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "She's been sleeping peacefully these days," she said softly. "No more nightmares." Ethan smiled. "She's healing. You both are." Sarah looked at him for a long moment before saying, "So are you." Ethan's gaze drifted toward the horizon, golden light spilling across the land. For the first time in years, he didn't feel empty. He felt whole. Sometimes, kindness doesn't start with grand gestures. It begins with a small act, listening to a frightened child, holding a trembling hand, showing up when no one else does. In those moments, lives change quietly, like seeds growing in the dark before they bloom into something beautiful. And as the wind rustled through the wheat fields, Ethan realized that maybe the ones we lose don't really leave us, they just send others to remind us how to love again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Gentle Heart, where every story reminds us that even in our darkest nights, kindness always finds a way to shine through. A year later, the farmhouse that once echoed with silence now hummed with life. The scent of freshly baked bread filled the air, laughter spilled from the porch, and wildflowers grew along the fence Ethan had rebuilt by hand. The town folks often joked that the Cole Ranch was no longer just a ranch, it had become a home with more heart than any place for miles. But for Ethan, Sarah, and little Lily, it wasn't about what others saw. It was about what they had all quietly survived together. Sarah's catering business had taken off more than she ever imagined. What started as a few pies and casseroles for local events turned into Heartland Kitchen, a cozy little food stall that people drove miles to visit. Ethan had built the wooden counter himself, carving their initials under the edge where no one could see. Sarah found it one morning while cleaning and just smiled. She didn't say anything, but that evening, she made him his favorite apple pie and wrote, "Thank you," in the crust with cinnamon sugar. It was their way, no big declarations, just small, steady acts of love. Lily had grown taller, bolder, happier. She'd started riding horses every morning before school, her laughter echoing through the hills. The ranch hands adored her, they called her the little boss. One morning, she came racing to the barn, waving a school flyer. "Daddy Ethan," she called him now without even thinking. The first time she said it, Sarah had quietly wiped away tears in the kitchen. "Daddy Ethan, there's a father-daughter event at school. Will you come?" Ethan froze, caught off guard by the word, father. It had been years since anyone called him that. He looked at her shining eyes, at the hope brimming there, and felt something break open inside him. He knelt down and said softly, "I'd be honored, sweetheart." She squealed, wrapping her arms around his neck. That evening, Sarah found him in the barn polishing his boots, something he rarely bothered with. "You nervous?" she teased gently. He chuckled. "A little. Never been to one of those." She sat beside him on the haystack. "You'll be perfect," she said. You already are to her. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, the only sound was the rustle of hay and the distant call of crickets. The night of the event, the gymnasium buzzed with families. Balloons hung from the rafters, music played, and children ran about. Ethan stood there in his best flannel shirt, awkward but proud. When Lily took his hand and led him to the dance floor, he felt an overwhelming rush of gratitude. For a man who had once believed his life ended the day he lost his wife, this moment felt like a second chance written by grace itself. When the music slowed, Lily looked up at him and said, "Mommy said my real daddy is in heaven, but she also said God sends helpers when hearts get lonely. You're my helper." Ethan's eyes blurred. He tightened his arms around her. "And you're mine, kiddo," he whispered. That night, after bringing her home, he found Sarah waiting on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching the stars. "She told me about the dance," she said softly. She was so proud. Ethan leaned against the post beside her. "She's an incredible kid. You've done a good job, Sarah." She turned toward him, her expression thoughtful. "We both have." Silence settled between them, warm and full. Then Sarah spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ethan, I don't know if I ever said this right, thank you. For not walking away that night. For staying. For saving me, even when I didn't think I was worth saving." He looked at her, really looked at her, the way her hair shimmered in the porch light, the strength that had returned to her eyes. "You were always worth it," he said quietly. "You just forgot for a while. I only reminded you." She smiled, tears glinting like stars. "Well," she said, "you reminded me how to live again." Years went by, and life continued its gentle rhythm. The seasons changed, the ranch grew, and so did their family. Ethan and Sarah eventually married on a spring morning under the old oak tree behind the house. Lily was the flower girl. She scattered petals wildly, laughing the whole way down the aisle. When the preacher asked Ethan if he promised to love and protect them forever, he didn't hesitate. "With everything I have," he said. After the ceremony, as they stood hand in hand watching the sunset, Sarah whispered, "He would have liked you, you know." Ethan smiled. "I hope so." She nodded. "I think he sent you, not to replace him, but to continue what he started. Love doesn't end, Ethan. It just changes form." Ethan felt a tear slip down his cheek. "Then I'll honor him by loving you both the best I can." That night, Lily placed her father's old photograph on the mantel beside a new family picture. She smiled up at it and whispered, "You don't have to sneak in anymore, Daddy. We're okay now." Then she blew a kiss to the frame before running off to bed. And as the fire crackled softly in the hearth, Sarah leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. "She's right," she murmured. "We're okay now." He kissed her forehead, holding her close as the night wrapped around them like a blanket of peace. Sometimes the people who walk into our lives aren't coincidences, they're answers to prayers we never found the words to say. They come when we've lost hope, stay when we try to push them away, and remind us that kindness can rebuild what heartbreak once destroyed. And as the stars shimmered over the quiet Montana sky, Ethan knew this truth deep in his soul: love doesn't always come when we expect it, but when it does, it heals everything it touches. If this story warmed your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Gentle Heart, where every story reminds us that love, compassion, and second chances still exist in this world.